Hi, my name is Isaac Pellerin. Welcome to the Make Water Work podcast. I'm doing a roundup episode this week. We've had so many guests over the past year, and one of the topics that has come up over and over is this topic of data centers. We know that it's a really hot topic. And so, the idea of how do we support the infrastructure? How do we cool the infrastructure? What's the impact from a resources standpoint? What's the impact from a community standpoint? And I went back and looked at all of the different clips that we've had where folks have talked about data centers. And I chose 5 different guests who had varying perspectives. There's no necessarily one theme, but there is urgency around what we're going to do with data centers, about the water supply, community engagement, economic development, and what it means to be a good neighbor over a watershed. And so the first clip that I want to focus on is with an episode we did last year with Bruno Piggott. So at the time, Bruno was coming off of his time working at the EPA and was in a bit of transition, and actually ended up as now working at the Water Reuse Association. And so, as he points out, that water reuse is one of the most practical responses to the data center conversation. That when we know that it uses a lot of water, what are the technologies that can help reduce the water footprint? And so, really, really cool to see how Bruno is putting his effort and energy directly into where he sees one of the biggest impact of his skill set could be. So let's watch that clip.
You know, the big thing, what's happening now, AI. With
Data
AI,
centers.
this data centers take up a ton of water. What's the right way to do that? They're proposing all over the place. One of the ways is water reuse. Instead of just having one-time use of water and putting contaminants in, let's have them reuse it, put in place water reuse facilities. So those are some of the things I think it will become bigger and bigger. And, with the change in climate, I don't care what you call it, but clearly rain events are becoming more intense. They're becoming more frequent, but they're also interspersed with greater periods of drought. That's going to be an issue that we need to tackle, and we can tackle it in a variety of different ways. So I guess there's a long list of things that we'll be concerned about.
So the next guest that I want to feature is Michelle Stockness. So Michelle works at Freshwater, and she brings a perspective that is really unrepresented in most data center conversations, and that's on community planning. And I think this is where so many communities are and water utility leaders are being caught flat-footed, is that they're being brought into the conversation a little bit too late to know how much water they're going to need to supply, those kind of things. And there are ways that companies who need data centers need to be able to work more collaboratively with the stakeholders in that region, so that they're communicating transparently with the communities. And so that's what this conversation really focuses on. So let's take a look at this clip.
Yeah, I think data centers is definitely the hot topic. It's like my new PFAS is what I like to say. Everybody everywhere wants to talk about it with you if they know you work in water. So it's sort of fascinating. But on one hand, the sort of urgency of it and newness of it is driving a lot of conversations that I think we've been waiting to have, and a lot of understanding that we've been waiting to have. So we think data centers are coming. They're coming to Minnesota, but we want them to be sited in a place that makes sense for long-term water supply. And we want to make sure they have smart design, as efficient as possible, water circularity, do those co-locations with other facilities. So that smart design, green infrastructure. And then we also want to see community engagement happen more in those projects. So that's what we're trying to do, is kind of work across sectors. We hear from community groups that they're really worried about them. They're scared of them. They don't want them. Who's in charge of them, and who can they talk to about it? So we kind of help them understand the development process and how they can engage, and, permitting processes in the state and regionally. We help utilities understand, what can you ask for as part of the development? What are water concepts to consider? Have you thought about a green roof? Have you thought about wastewater reuse? Have you thought about, what will happen if you use a lot of groundwater and that's not available for drinking water? Things like that. We've also talked to, government from the local to the state level. What's their role? How are they going to engage? Government and development move very differently. There's different speeds. So I think that's a lot of the conflict lately. And then also helping businesses understand what's, in Minnesota, what's our processes, what are the permitting processes, who are good stakeholders to engage with. So I think there's a lot of translation and coordination also with elected officials. But if you look at it, it's a real opportunity to have for projects, if they're done well, can have economic benefits, but they also can have community benefits and ecological benefits too. But if we can slow it down enough to think about those things in the beginning, that's what we're hoping for.
Yeah.
We could not agree more. And so, I'm curious, what is the ideal stakeholder group? If you're designing your table, who are the heads that you want at that table to create a model of good? Because I do think it's a lot of bottoms up right now that we're seeing, and that's not working, right? So I would love your thoughts on, if you could design a table of stakeholders, who do you think needs to be at that table?
Yeah, I think, what we're really recommending at Freshwater is sort of regional planning. Who else is in your region that might be affected by this? Is it community groups? Do you have regional water planners? Maybe you don't even have regional water planners, but, other economic development teams, water teams. If only economic development would get the water people to the table a lot earlier than after the agreement signed, that would be wonderful. So economic development and water talking a lot earlier. Community groups sort of want to know what's going on, what type of business is it. I think watershed groups, soil and water conservation districts, whoever the sort of watershed group is in the region is really important. And then state government has a lot of resources available too. And, they might have permitting roles, but they might just have information about unintended consequences or private well users in the area, trout streams, things like that might be helpful for businesses siting. So I think it's sort of taking a little bit more time in that due diligence and stakeholder engagement phase in the beginning.
Yes. Yeah. Could not agree more.
Yeah. And then our next clip is with Anthony DeRosa. So Anthony is the executive director at the Association of State Drinking Water Administrators. And he has a lot of nuance in this conversation that I think is valuable. He takes a much longer view lens, and but he also talks about, the need for there to be standardization, because this is such a new technology, a new thing. There's variance on how different states are going to think about what type of regulation and what parameters and what container should really be in conversations that center around building data centers. And so Anthony always has an interesting perspective, but there's also, how do we better understand what negotiation can really look like for water communities, or for communities that are looking to figure out what the water resources that they're going to use or be required to use, what that looks like. So let's take a look at that clip.
Data center thing, I tend to think is sort of this flip problem. And I say that because there's going to be this huge push for data centers now. There's this new kind of awakening that, hey, this might impact us. I think all of the, the sector's kind of getting around to creating a lot of great panels and discussion around what are the opportunities, what are the challenges, what are the concerns. Not all data centers are created equal. So when we're trying to evaluate that water use,
we've had that conversation.
Very challenging to do any type of fair analysis. And then you look at the bigs, your Amazons, Googles, Metas, folks like that. When they're building these massive campuses, it's built into the value proposition for them to bring down the costs of operation.
Right.
And so they're really the ones that I see leading the charge in terms of how are we going to reduce water use? How are we going to set different best practices for that? So I really think there's an opportunity and a necessity to partner with them to better understand how this can play out. There may need to be a time when we understand the difference between, well, this is an acceptable water use, and this is not an acceptable water use. And I'm not sure how that would work out. I mean, that's the
but it's coming up. And in fact, we just did a podcast. We're talking about the discrepancy. Not every data center is created equal. That in the design phase of what they're seeing, this is an expert kind of doing innovation across the space. They said one data center had like 100 folks focused on the water use issue. And then the other data center that they were collecting data from had 2. And, and it's just like totally different, and it's just like, there's got to be some sort of level of standards of which all data centers are going to be holden to when it comes to, like, there's no reason why there shouldn't be, but it's going to be fascinating to see how this plays out.
Yeah, I think it's when you look at water use efficiency numbers, that seems to be that's our proprietary. And that's the one area where I wonder if that's going to be the focus for us. What do we really need to know about a data center coming in to make those choices? And if I'm being totally honest, I'm not sure it's going to be our fight. I really, if you're looking, across the data center news feed, it's communities. I think these are getting hip
very
to
local. This is a very local.
The big like NIMBY push, like not in my backyard. I'm in Virginia, and when you're driving down, I remember like 20 years ago driving out to Reston. We used to practice at my buddy's parents' house out there. And that was like, it was just a toll road out to nothing, right? There's nothing out there. Even I remember we'd leave at like 10 o'clock at night. The toll booths were no longer had people in it. You had to have a credit card to get home on the toll road. And that was first for me. I thought that was really weird. But over time, you start seeing all these data centers and everything cropping up. No big deal, right? Very different from building one in my literal backyard, which is really what you're starting to see now. And I think that is going to become the thing that starts to really control whether or not data centers are blowing up on us. For water use, I think we need to continue educating ourselves. I think utilities can stand to consider the opportunities that might be available to them in terms of investment in the distribution system. We have water that they need, and they have something that we need, which is way more money than probably the whole sector.
Yeah.
When I think about the profit margins on a data center like that, and I'm like, man, what if we just took a sliver of that and invest it in the distribution system, get those lead service lines out, put in a leak detection system.
To your point, it's going to come down so much to state and local policy on how they choose to engage with that opportunity.
But no doubt it is an opportunity.
But it is.
So it's one of those. I feel like I'm like riding on both sides of the fence on data centers. I absolutely am aware of the potential public health and environmental impacts of them, and that concerns me greatly. I also like to introduce into the conversation the abandoned mall concept, that at what point will all the data centers be obsolete?
Yeah.
And then we have these gigantic abandoned shopping malls.
That's a great point.
In everyone's backyard.
Yeah.
Because I think about the march of technology in terms of centralized, decentralized, large, small, things like that. And the idea that a community might shut down my $1 billion project is not going to fly for me in the future. And bigs are going to be already thinking about putting data centers in space, putting them underwater, putting them in the Arctic.
I
don't melt the ice caps because I made that fair.
I think that's crazy.
Or even going with the distributed models. And I've said, really crazy ideas like everyone having a small data center in their home, submerged in their water heater, helping to heat their water, capturing some of that energy, but distributing it so that it's not in one physical location anymore.
And now our next clip is with Damian Georgino. He is a partner at Denton's, and he really looks at this from the market standpoint. And so when you look at both direct and indirect water use, He explains why both matter and how you need a little bit of both. He brings a lot of economic development framing into the way, in a way that's practical and honest. Water availability is now one of the first questions a hyperscaler asks when they're siting a facility. And so that changes the leverage that communities have, and utilities are starting to pay attention to that. And again, it's moving so fast. And so folks like Damien have a really important perspective that we should listen to. So let's take a look at that clip.
Let's start with data centers. They're both. Let's do data centers.
Yeah, data centers.
AI is not going away.
So data centers, there are a couple of ways of looking at data centers. Excuse me. The first is that they use a lot of water, directly use a lot of water. I saw a report that said by 2028 or something like that, the use of water, and that's for cooling. You use it to cool these servers get hot. You have to cool them. So the direct use of water is going to be something like 1.5 trillion gallons a day. And I think that might be just for the U.S.
Do you know where we are now? I mean, in an order of magnitude. Yeah.
So we're getting there. We're getting there. But you saw Oracle came out and said we'll need 2,000 more data centers by 2030 or some such number. It's a massive amount of water. That's just the direct usage. Now, there are a lot of people that are saying, look, we can recycle, recirc. You don't just draw and send it out because heat is a pollutant under EPA rules. And you're now looking at taking water to the chip with some of the more advanced chips.
That's right.
Taking the water right to the chip. But there's a direct usage, and that's not going to go away. It's not like these data centers come up with new technology and the existing data centers don't go away. They stay in place. So you'll have that new draw that we never had before. We never had that draw on that water usage. And a lot of the data centers are going into water short areas.
That's right.
Reno, above Reno. Here in Indianapolis,
that's right.
There's a kerfuffle over that. So no matter where you go, it's an additional draw on water. Can they get to a point where you reduce the amount of water? Yes. There's a lot of the hyperscalers as well as the off-takers, the Mag 7 and things like that are talking about a net zero. They're talking about net positive. Not certain you'll ever get there because the other side of it is the energy piece of it.
Yeah.
The indirect use of water on the energy side, which can be as much as 40% more, just because 40% of the cost of energy is in water. And so I think you have for a lot of these technologies, other than solar, but you do have to use water to clean the mirrors and things like that.
Everything comes back to water, right? You need water.
I can make anything a water company. So I think there's the direct and indirect use. It's going to be an issue. It's going to be there. We do a lot of economic development for hyperscalers and for chip manufacturers, for a lot of other industries that come in. One of their first questions is now, what's the availability of water? We did a project in North Carolina where it was I tend to not disclose clients only because there's an ethical issue around that. But they came in and said we want to be we don't want to be tied to the municipal system. And so they instituted a recycle, recirc, reuse system. They had to obviously pull in water, but they didn't want to discharge water back to the system because they wanted to be a good corporate citizen. So economic development, which includes data centers, needs water. And managing and developing those relationships, understanding how it's used, I think is vitally critical. So that's the data center side. It's not going away. It's only going to get bigger. You go around the world, it's exacerbated in places like the Middle East. But where you're here in Charlotte, or excuse me, Indianapolis, it doesn't matter. Ubiquitous. There's only a certain amount of water.
That's right.
And you have to, there isn't you aren't water rich necessarily. You do have water, but is it water rich is a different issue. You still have to be sustainable. You still have to be considerate. AI in water technology,
Oh, yes.
I think is absolutely critical to the future success. It's an intelligence that right now I think we're just getting familiar with. I think there are a lot of really nifty applications for AI. So a couple of the companies that I work with have these new AI/ML, I guess is a better way.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Where you've got all these sensors out in the field, you've got an ERP back here.
Yep.
They bridge the gap.
That's right.
They read the sensor, turn it into actionable information,
It's a brilliant application.
take it back into the ERP, and things happen, right?
Yeah.
And those things that happen make the system more efficient, but also you're not adding a bunch of CapEx, which again goes back into the rate structure, but it's more of an operating model, and it's an inexpensive model.
And then lastly, we had Peter Eulis, our final clip. And, Peter really has done a ton of research that is really, really important because, so many of these what we're realizing is that not all data centers are created equal. Some companies have over 100 people that are focused exclusively on water efficiency and sourcing and how they are being responsible, and some have maybe two. And so when there's that big of a variance, that says that where we're sitting right now is in a very squishy, not hyper standardized, we're in, as he says, we're in the early innings of this AI and data center conversation, and so it's messy. It's in need of standardization, and in need of research and surfacing things like we talk about in this report that Peter shares. And so let's take a look at that clip.
In some of our research, we went to some of the biggest data center operators and developers out there, and what was surprising was the variety of emphasis they were putting on water. In some cases, a company would have hired over 100 people just to focus on solving water for their data center operations and development. Others of equal size have two. And, it was really interesting to see that just the different emphasis that they might place on. Some are trying to solve water use effectiveness. Microsoft has a new campus in Wisconsin that's almost zero water use. It's closed loop, and others are more focused on water replenishment, where they're not reducing the water demand of a data center. They're just trying to find water in the natural environment to replace
what they're using.
Water use. So the variety of ways they are addressing sustainability, is quite broad.
So Peter, where do you think the standardization will come from, or do you think there will be standardization for these things?
There was an effort. AB 93 was an attempt to standardize reporting and monitoring of water use in data centers in California, and it was vetoed by Governor Newsom. Unfortunately, I think, but that is the type of standardization we should at least have as a minimum bar, is around monitoring and reporting of water use. I think that should be done universally.
And I just think every economic development, I'm going to send it to mine here in the Indiana Association ecosystem, needs to read this report, because I think it does show some of the variability of how, to your point out, how people are looking at this, 2 versus 100. And I just, there needs to be some layer of kind of standardization, or where are the best practices that we are, pointing to, because it does seem like it could get a little bit wild west out there pretty quickly if it's not already there in some certain.
Yeah, data centers represent a huge increase in the GDP of our country. Like, I think it was reported that 92% of the incremental growth in the economy last year was due to data centers and AI. So if we're going to be spending that kind of money, we should at least be knowing what the water use effectiveness and the water intensity and total water use are for these systems. You can't manage what you don't measure.
That's one of my favorite lines. I love that. And you can, and that's the thing. There are technologies out there to do just that. So why not adopt them and build upon them, right?
Yeah.
So help us frame up then, Peter, you talked about the GDP. Where do you see the growth of this space? I mean, crystal ball, where do you see this? How big do you see this space getting?
Yeah, we're in early innings in AI, right? It's transforming our economy. Every company's becoming an AI company or is using AI. So, we're still going to be building this out for the next 20 years at least. And so I think it's important that investors like Echo River are supporting the new entrepreneurs and innovators, and that there are data center operators who want to adopt and deploy new innovations for water efficient cooling technologies. That's the point of this report. We're hoping others will take a look at this and invest in it, and nod to us, for ideas where of the next big thing.
All right. So that's it. 5 voices, 5 perspectives. And if you listen closely, a few things run through all of them. Water is not a commodity that data centers can treat as an afterthought. The communities living near these facilities are paying attention, and they're asking questions the industry isn't always ready to answer. And the gap between the operators who are taking water seriously and those who aren't is wide enough that someone, whether that's regulators, communities, or the market, is eventually going to close it. And so I am confident that this is going to keep coming up as we talk to more guests. But this is an important topic in the myriad of topics, whether it's water quality, asset compliance, or even water resources. But at the end of the day, it's how are we making water work for the communities that we serve? So thank you for tuning in to this episode of Make Water Work.